מי שעומד מאחורי ההתקפה היום ישלם את בנו המחיר. מזה זמן איראן מנסה באמצעות החיזבאללה להקים חזית טרור נוספת נגדנו מרמת הגולן. אנחנו פועלים בתקיפות ובאחריות נגד הניסיון הזה.
We are rapidly reaching another critical mass in the Middle East regarding Israel. Iran has now openly targeted the children of the Israeli prime minister. Their alliance with Hezbollah gets stronger, and the repercussions are already being felt all the way to the Americas. Our guest is an Israeli diplomat and politician. He served in the nation's foreign service for over 20 years, most recently as deputy foreign minister from 2008 to 2012. Welcome, Danny Ayalon, to MidPoint. Mr. Ayalon, thank you so much for joining us.
You're most welcome, Ed.
What should we take from the fact that Iran is now encouraging all of its allies in terror to pursue the children of Netanyahu? They already have apparently photographs of the kids lined up in the crosshairs and declaring, we must await the hunt of Hezbollah. What do we take from this?
Well, it's yet another manifestation of the most brutal terroristic regime of Tehran. And then we are remindful of the fact that Tehran really is a hub of terror. They're behind the Hezbollah, they're behind the Hamas. They are the ones who actually are very active in Yemen to topple the regime in Yemen. They are very much involved in Iraq. They are involved in Afghanistan. They are involved, of course, in Syria. We know that. And they have also have been known to have terror attacks all over the world, whether it was in Argentina in 92 and 94, attempts on American and Israeli diplomats in New Delhi, in Bangkok, in Azerbaijan, and other places. So right now, it seems like they are moving into a higher level, and I think it is a high time for the entire international community to put an end to that.
When you say high time, certainly there are people here in America who would agree with that in Congress, because these are the people here who are screaming that we should not be trying to seek any sort of a nuclear deal with Iran. Is the rest of the world and the terrorists themselves, in your opinion, taking its cue from America right now? The fact that America seems to be more in a conciliatory mood towards Iran than actually being hard-lined?
Absolutely. I would say if a superpower like the United States, and it's the only superpower, I don't think there's any rival, there is no match to the United States. Syria and Russia and China together are not a match to the U.S. with great capabilities. But it's not just a matter of capabilities, it's a matter of will. And if the notion is that the United States is taking off options from the table, then these options may come later on with a much heavier price. In order to prevent a war, you have to prepare for one. And if the Iranians know that there will never be more sanctions, or there is not a consideration of a military option, then they can continue to play around, continue to play tough, and they will never really have any incentives to back down on their very dangerous nuclear program. And also, they are backing of terrorism all over the world.
We see pictures of tanks moving. We hear about children being targeted. We hear the Israeli prime minister saying that whomever is responsible will pay the ultimate price. Sad to say that we have heard these words all before. In your opinion, what is going to be the flashpoint? What is going to be that one thing, outside of a nuclear device being used, but that one instance that you believe we're on the road to right now that will force Israel's hand to take real hard offensive action against Iran?
I would look at two things. First of all, if, of course, we will have shelling on Israelis, whether in the Golan Heights from Syria or on the Galilee from Lebanon by Hezbollah, or even Hamas in Gaza. All these are coming from the same inspiration and the same source of backing them, which is in Tehran. The second flashpoint could be if the Iranians, with their organ, which is an integral part of Iran, is with the Hezbollah, that organization in Lebanon, if they will target Israeli diplomats or Israeli embassies all over the world, which they are also threatening, I think that could also be a turning point where Israel will have to react in a massive way.
I only have about 30 seconds before we take a break. Do you agree or disagree with a statement made by a reporter recently that said it seems that there is no appetite among any of these three nemesis, Israel, Iran, and Hezbollah, to dangerously escalate the tensions? Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do, because for Israel, there's no appetite for escalation anytime. You know, in a democracy, you know that you don't want to have any wars. Secondly, there is elections coming in Israel, so there is no reason for escalation there. Iran is mired in Syria, so also in Hezbollah. So they would not have any interest to open a second front from their point of view.
All right, please stand by a moment. You mentioned the elections. We're going to take a short break. We're going to come back with the president and regard to Israel elections and how a trip to meet Congress would seem to be damaging Israel and even helping the Obama administration, where we question everything. This is MidPoint. Back to work with former Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister, now a Rennert family visiting professor at Yeshiva University, Danny Ayalon joins us. Mr. Ayalon, let me ask you about the president's response now to not meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu when he comes to America. He says it would be inappropriate for him to meet with the prime minister 2 weeks before an election in that country. There are some people saying that there's a whole lot more to it than just the Israeli elections. Which side do you fall on?
Well, admittedly, it is unusual to get the invitation from Congress and not from the White House, but this is something between Congress and White House. Israel has no responsibility over coordination between these two branches of the American government. I would say that because of the substance, because of the timing, because of the menace from Iran, I think this is primary. And this should take precedence over protocol or over false pride. So I think that the president should have seen Netanyahu. Israel is the best ally of the United States in the Middle East and even beyond. The threat is not just to Israel, it's also to the United States and all its allies. So they should strategize and work together.
But, Professor, what about the other side of that argument, which has people in Israel, certainly members of the Knesset, a number of governmental agencies, there are people who say they do not want Barack Obama involved in the Israeli elections. They basically told him, keep your hands out of it, don't get involved. Isn't the president then, if he hears that, being smart and saying, okay, I'm hands off, I'm not going to get involved now?
Right, but for that, I would say there are some creative ideas. You know, the fact that he is seeing, let's say, if he was to see Prime Minister Netanyahu 2 weeks before the elections, he could have also invited the head of opposition to hear him. So that kind of evens out. And that would have seen as being neutral or at least being impartial vis-a-vis the elections. And at the same time, getting the opportunity to really strategize against Iran.
If the president had his druthers, and again, in your opinion, do you think he would really like to see Benjamin Netanyahu out of office, put somebody else in there that he can deal with?
Well, it seems like, you know, I cannot speak from him or for this administration, but certainly from all the leaks that comes from the White House, this is certainly the case.
Let's ask about the prime minister himself. Is it wrong for him to go before Congress? Because there are some people who are afraid that this will blow up in his face. It will actually then not look good for him back home, and it may also help the Obama administration.
He is certainly taking a high risk here, but he does it from his own conviction that, you know, you have to speak up, and you know, he still is distraught under this. He's still traumatized from the fact that back in the 30s of last century, when the menace from Hitler came, nobody spoke up, and, you know, we ended up with 6 million Jews in gas chambers. So he feels this is his duty. I say it could have been done in a more diplomatic and useful way. That means to pre-advise the White House, not to ignore the White House. There were better tactical ways to try and avoid all the pitfalls. And right now, I'm afraid that the attention, instead of being focused on Iran, the attention is being focused on the relationship between Obama and Bibi Netanyahu.
Here's another issue, a couple minutes that we have left now. Certainly after the attacks in France, there's news of a number of Jews who want to leave France. They want to get out. They're even talking about going to Israel now. It seems as if that around the world there are so many places where Jews feel uncomfortable, where they still feel as if anti-Semitism is on the rise, and many of them do want to return or go to Israel for the first time. Are we looking at a new age of exodus here, almost a call to arms for Jews to go to Israel, be part of the homeland, and help protect what is theirs?
That could easily be the case. If we look at history, since the State of Israel was reestablished in 1948 in our historic homeland, we had waves of immigration. Some of them came out of sheer Zionism, that means the return of Zion, the return to the land of Israel, the biblical faith, and some were because they were afraid of pogroms. This was the case in Arab countries. We had the exodus from Jews from Arab countries after 48. We had the exodus from the Soviet Union later on, from Ethiopia. So that could easily be the new wave from Western Europe.
How do you think that new wave will change things in Israel? Certainly you're going to have younger generations who are coming in with different ideas.
Absolutely. I think it's all for the better. I think all the immigration waves to Israel, just like in the United States, immigration energizes the country, brings it new ideas. There is a great melting pot, and Israel is a country like the U.S., which reinvents itself every few years. So it's great for the economy, it's great for education and technology, and it's also strengthening the country demographically. At
a time when it seems they need all the strengthening they can get, certainly with the way Iran now has Israel right square in its sights and does pretty much 24/7. Professor Danny Ayalon, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I'll look forward to talking to you again.
My pleasure.
Take care. It makes no difference how much empirical data and personal evidence is out there. Some people refuse to vaccinate their kids, and that means others are in danger of becoming ill. But there's another side to that. There could be a whole lot of kids getting very sick. There could even be some adults getting sick. But there is the outside chance that one unvaccinated child could kill another. That's all part of the danger. We'll discuss that and more when we continue right here on MidPoint.